forward you the information if you want to.
Yeah. Good evening and welcome to the May 6th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. Take a motion for approval of the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Director Deerdorf, will you please read the purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you very much. And our celebration and recognition this night is School Board Recognition Month.
Yes. So I passed out certificates to each of you at your seats and wanted to publicly thank you for the work that you do. You spend countless hours and it is a volunteer position. So we definitely appreciate the time you put in. Coming from a different district and seeing the amount of time that this board puts in, our community is lucky to have you and the dedication that you have for our school district, our community, and our students. Greatly appreciated. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will go ahead and open the public hearing for the new high school bid issuance number 1 site work package. And seeing that no one has signed up to speak, I will go ahead and close that public hearing. And before I entertain motions, Jerry, Dean, and Kristen, if you want to come up and provide all of us a little bit of information of what we are about to vote on and answer any questions for us, please.
While they're doing that, I just want to say welcome to all the kids, not even kids, you guys are seniors, right? And so it's the end of the semester, so you get to come to the board meeting. Is that what the deal is? Yeah. We love having you here. Thank you. Did you put it off until the end of the semester?
Well, we're on our way with the new high school. This is the first step in the process. That's starting the culmination of work that's been, we've been involved with at least over the past year. And we hired Story Construction over a year ago, and then we assembled our design team. But finally, we've had the first set of bids, issuance number 1, which includes site development. That work includes site grading dirt work, moving dirt around, basically, and some site utilities. And that's going to occur throughout the entire duration of the project, so from June 3rd until we get it final graded towards the end of the project in 2022. Does it go through the demolition? So it does include final grading at the demolition. The other bid package that we received bids was for the geothermal well field. And so that was it. We're launched off with this. We're asking for approval of these 2 contracts that are in excess of about $10 million. That's kind of a big number, but in the big scope of things, the total construction cost that we're going to be asking you to approve here in a couple months when we get the rest of the bids is going to be just a little bit over $110 million. So don't worry about the numbers. They're just zeros and ones, right? So we received the bids, and I explained that in the board agenda form. We have the bid tallies, and we want to go ahead and award everything. All the bids we received are responsive and responsible, so we just like to go ahead and get approval to award the bids. And if you have any questions, then I have my my knowledge here with me.
I just have one question. I'm curious about how the bids aligned with the estimates that we were anticipating.
So, in sum total, the sum total of the 2 estimates aligned very closely, about 3.5% over. There were some circumstances of this. We think that's a win. That's within the normal range of bids. So we're happy to be where we are and moving forward. We had savings in the geothermal package, and we had an overage in the site work package. but the sum total of them was within 3.5%.
Thank you.
Dean, with the projects coming up over the course of the summer, how will our project pair up for bidding on other larger projects? So is Iowa State or other larger firms going to be bidding on other projects? So how does our major 110 million then line up with those?
To our knowledge, the project we'll be bidding is the largest that is bidding
Okay.
in this time frame, which is a good thing. I think our project is one that people are looking for and are anticipating. So we look forward to receiving the bids. There are other large projects at Iowa State and at schools elsewhere, but none of them are as large as the Ames High project.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for them? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here and providing us the information. We appreciate it. I will go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move the board award the contract for bid package number 31-1, site development to Construct Incorporated in the amount of $9,255,000. Second.
No.
Secondly, I move the board award contract for bid package number 32-2, geothermal ground heat exchanger to QC Geothermal Incorporated in the amount of $1,740,000.
Second.
So we are going to just take the first motion. We need to take them individually. So I have Deerdorf and Rosser who have moved and seconded for item 1, which is the 9.255 million bid package with Construct. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. I will now entertain another motion.
I move the board award the contract for bid package number 23-2, geothermal ground heat exchanger to QC Geothermal Inc. in the amount of $1,740,000.
Second.
Moved by Bankin, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you very much. I will now open the public hearing for the resolution for the conveyance of real property. Seeing that we have no one signed up to speak, I will close the public hearing and take a motion.
I'll take this long one. I move that the real property described herein shall be conveyed by the district to the city of Ames for good and valuable consideration. Conveyance by the district shall be by storm sewer easement. The board president and secretary are authorized to sign all conveyance documents for the real property described herein. The board president, secretary, superintendent, administrative officers of the district are authorized to take all actions necessary to complete the above described transaction, including execution of ancillary documents.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Bankin. Discussion. We will vote on roll call.
Perez, aye.
Deerdorf, aye.
Binkin, aye.
Beerbaum, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Colton, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Passes 7-0. Thank you very much. I will go ahead and now read our statement on public comments on our discussion items as well as our public forum. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. Our first discussion item this evening is the AHS Therapeutic Learning Center presentation. We have Brian Carrico and Jean Muhammad here to present for us this evening.
recruited some others.
Thanks for joining him.
That's a much better picture than Jerry's hand. Did you guys notice that?
Well, thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you for having us here tonight. This is something that is kind of special to all of us in the TLC room, but also to Ames High School. And it's an opportunity that not many schools have been able to do. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you to the district and to Spence Evans and for the people that have allowed us to take this on this year. In the recent Iowa Youth Survey that has been released for Ames High School, one of the questions asked during the past 12 months, have you seriously thought about killing yourself? Our results were 14% of our 6th graders had said yes. 18% of our 8th graders had said yes. And 31% of our 11th graders had said yes, that they had thought about seriously killing themselves in the past 12 months. So those numbers are alarming, and those numbers are not only is it alarming to the fact of what can happen to the student for suicidal ideation, but also that they feel that way in our schools. And they are struggling in our schools with academics, with social emotional, and we have been able to do something extremely positive in these young people's lives. And I'm going to turn that part over to Jean. But I want to say again, thank you. This is something that we started at the beginning of the year with Jean and Jackie and I, and then we were able to add Caitlin in second semester. It has been amazing to see kids work with each other, work with staff, and work with our TLC group to make amazing progress. And again, I'm going to turn this over to Jean, and she'll give you the rest of the data.
Well, I just want to echo Brian's thanks. I feel like we've received a tremendous amount of support at every level, so from district administration all the way down to our building administration and our coworkers. And I think that it is allowing us to make a pretty significant difference in a lot of lives. And so we know that we couldn't do that without you all's support and the support of the other people that we work with. So thank you for that again. And Brian kind of stole my thunder by sharing some of the data before we were ready, but that's okay. So I guess let's start with why create a therapeutic learning community. We last year had served at Ames High School in my new role as the student and family advocate, served 104 students actively. So that means that of those 104 students, they were receiving one-on-one skill development or counseling support. They were receiving crisis intervention, family engagement, connections to community resources, and the need just started in the new year. Well, I thought maybe we'll kind of ease into the new year, because I kind of eased in my first year because not everybody knew who I was and what I did. This year didn't start like that. It started with the floodgates just open, and the needs were coming in faster than we could meet them. And we were sort of running a triage. I'd say out of the student services office, I'd have students in several different offices in crisis, some in the waiting area of the student services, and we were running back and forth between different rooms. And at that time, Jackie was there, and she was in a different office space, and so we had some issues with communication and making sure that all the needs were being met effectively. And so we went and spoke with Brian and Spence and felt that we could meet those needs in a better way by having a space designated for that. So There was a recent CNN report also that just echoes what the Iowa Youth Survey data shows us, that between 2007 and 2015, the number of hospitalizations and emergency room visits for suicidal ideation or suicidal attempt doubled to 1.12 million. So I think that, and I've been telling everyone who will listen that I believe that mental health will completely change the face of education in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that we're going to have ongoing, increasing need to address student mental health at all levels. So that's kind of where this idea for a therapeutic learning community started. And so far in 2018, 2019, we have identified, we have 21 identified Tier 3 students. Those are students who are spending a significant portion of their day in the therapeutic learning community. 53 identified Tier 2 students, and of those, 21 are identified as high risk. So any change in a protective capacity in their life could push them into the Tier 3 spectrum. And we have 4 students currently on the waiting list to be involved in the TLC program on a more significant basis. We have had 9 students admitted to inpatient hospitalization this year, and 7 returned from residential treatment facilities. So as you can imagine, if we have kids who are needing that high level of mental health or social emotional support, when they come back from inpatient, they're not really ready to be just tossed back into sort of like the traditional school day of an Ames High School student. And they need that ongoing support that they were receiving while in residential, and continued skill development in this new environment, so that they have the opportunity to generalize their skills that they learned while in residential treatment into a new environment or a returning environment. So that's kind of like giving you some of the data, some of the numbers of what we're looking at, what we're dealing with. When we started the TLC program, we thought that we wanted to identify some roles for each of us. So Brian is obviously our administrator. He's our supervisor who we go to with questions about how to handle situations if we aren't sure what to do. He backs us on a lot of things where it's nice to have that extra support. Caitlin and I are the student and family advocates, and Jackie is the behavior and academic progress specialist. So we kind of identified some of primary roles, but to be honest with you, we all cross all of those spectrums. Any one of us could talk to a teacher about how to support a student's academic plan. Jackie very frequently meets one-on-one with a student to provide support for them. We all do skill development, both individual and group, throughout our days. So there's a lot of crossover in our roles, but Jackie's primary role is supporting students' academic plans and modifying and accommodating student needs, whereas Caitlin and I's primary role is supporting student mental health. Let's see. Some of the services that we provide are listed on the right side of the page that Caitlin very nicely developed for us. That's one of her special talents. And so you can look at those. That's not everything that we do, but those are some of our primary functions. And then let me just talk to you about some of the common issues that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Several of our students are dealing with suicidal ideation or attempts. Some of them have experienced sexual assault or sexual abuse. Many of them are struggling with severe anxiety and depression and have significant trauma histories and high adverse childhood experiences scores. We are using evidence-based interventions in our work with them. We're using the sanctuary model to start our day, which is a morning meeting that creates community and is based on 4 agreements. And we set goals with each, as a group, we set goals for every student for their day. And also it gives us an opportunity to check in with them, their emotional well-being, and know if we need to have a one-on-one with them that's more in depth. We're also using the Boys Town model of social skill development and aggression replacement training, along with other anxiety and depression tools, antidepressant tools that we can access. Our typical day in TLC starts with sanctuary meeting, like I said. Very often, one of the 3 of us is meeting with a student one-on-one. We're doing skill development, so teaching coping skills, teaching self-advocacy, just working with them on positive reframing and all kinds of things like that to help them to be able to better have better success in the classroom setting. Our goal is to be 100% academic and 100% therapeutic. So we want to make sure that we're doing both, supporting both of those things. If you came into our classroom, some students would be attending classes, some would be working on academics, might be look like a study hall to you. Some would be working in a therapeutic workbook that we developed together, and others would be working on other therapeutic work. We have a lot of fidgets and coping tools in our room. So we've got slime and putty coming out of our ears and just lots of things like that. We also have been gifted with 3 weighted blankets, which are really helpful for us when we have a student who's having a panic attack or an anxiety attack, which is really great. And sometimes students might be taking breaks, so they might be playing their guitar because that's an important coping mechanism for them, or drawing, or journaling, or writing poetry, or something like that. So one of the best things about the therapeutic learning community is the flexibility that we have to do what's best for each student in that moment. So I think that we're off to a really great start. I think there's areas for growth, and I'm really, really excited about what the future holds for the therapeutic learning community and for social, emotional, and mental health just in the entire district. I think we're on to something exciting.
Any questions for any of them here tonight?
Sure. Well, I'd like to get started. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. I've heard some wonderful things that in the work that you guys have been doing and helping our students throughout this past year, and it's been very heartwarming to see the impact that you've had on a lot of students throughout the year. I do have one question related to specifically related to students who unfortunately have to miss school because of inpatient care that they have to seek. How is their makeup work handled? In other words, obviously they're missing several days of school. Are they expected to make it up, or is there some flexibility provided to them, that basically excuses them from the regular course requirements?
So a lot of the increased anxiety for the students coming back, not only to the social setting of the high school, but not having the stability of their inpatient setting, they also are worried about all of the makeup work. And we do have, we've identified teachers in the departments throughout the building, and they do what we call condense or compacting. They make sure that they still are meeting the criteria for the classes, but perhaps if they've missed 3 different maps of Africa that they had to do for a class, the teacher will review that in a smaller way with them, or provide that to us to help them with, and try and keep it to the very important parts that there would be, anyone would need to remember from that, as opposed to excessive amounts.
Okay, that's great to hear, because it could be, along with everything else they're working through, to come back in school and deal with the stress, to have to make up every little quiz and every little assignment and everything. So that's wonderful that you're providing that opportunity for them too.
One of the things that we're going to hopefully work on this summer is that we're going to do what's called compacting. And so we have a couple teachers that are willing to come in over the summer and look at the standards that we have and find the essential standards for the classes to say this is what they have to know in order to pass the class and they're going to work on creating that curriculum for kids in just that situation. So we'll be able to compact, and we'll be able to work on that to still give them the quality education.
Right.
But instead of doing 53 math problems, they might only have to do 23, and kind of work through that way.
Yeah, because it's important, not that they're, being let go of that requirement or the stress of dealing with it, but also they're they are getting that information so that by the end of the quarter or the semester, they have that knowledge to move forward and, achieve their goals in that particular course, so.
One of the things that we like to talk with the teachers about is the ability to make it meaningful for them, but also meet their needs. And an example that I always use is if I take away your glasses and put you in the back of the room and say you need to be successful now, that's probably not going to work for a lot of our kids. Well, it's the same way with our kids that are struggling with some mental health needs. They possibly can do it with less and still be able to learn and to have the good education that the great education that we're providing at Ames, but we do it in a little different manner for them.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate what you do. It really matters. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the transition, like how students transition out and out of the program, because I see you have 4 students on a waiting list, and I wonder how do you work with that?
So our goal, what we'd like to see is that if you think of TLC program as a tier 3 intervention, what we'd like to have that be is a 6 to 8 week intensive intervention to meet students when they're at the highest level of crisis and risk, and then to transition them back to tier 2 interventions that could be provided by other staff members in the building. And so I think that's another area that we're going to work really hard to develop and strengthen our tier 2 interventions. It's one of the things that makes transitioning kids out of the TLC program right now a little bit difficult, is that we don't have as many of those types of supports in place as we'd like to. And so we're doing a couple of different things right now. We're doing something called Trial Out, where we feel like a student has gotten the maximum benefit out of the TLC program. And so we're working with their counselors to become that tier 2 support and trial them out for a week at a time. And we've had some really good success with that so far. And I'm hoping that we'll keep strengthening the structure and the system to make sure that we can move kids along the different levels of the MTSS tiers seamlessly.
And my last comment is, that's a lot of services you provide. Did you bring people from outside resources, or are you doing everything? This is a lot.
Yeah, we're definitely working with community resources for sure. We are doing some of all of this, but we're not doing all of that, if that makes sense. So for example, Jackie's worked with Mid-Iowa Community Action to bring in 2 people who are teaching a life skills group during our plus period 2 days a week. And we have brought in someone to do guided meditation during plus period 1 day a week. The school is offering to all students trauma-informed yoga during the day. And we also are referring out to, for therapy and coordinating with therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists on a regular basis. That's like one of our probably primary responsibilities.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing this forward and getting the program off and started. 2 questions for you. First, is there any risk to the district by having more of a clinical therapeutic environment? So a lot of information you talked about goes back and forth between professional therapists. I'm just curious, are there risks at all that as the need grows, how do we balance students' need with private information, and do we open ourselves up for anything?
Well, with FERPA law, we have to be very careful with what we release, but when we work with the outside agencies, we always have a release. So parents sign, and we also sign, so we can share information back and forth. So that's one area that we make sure we always have the release. We have too talked about, if we are going to provide this, are we going to be able to continue to provide it when we find more needs or that sort of thing? And I think that right now we're meeting our needs. We definitely have 4 people on the list. But as far as a risk assessment for the district, I don't see any. I mean, we've ran it through central office or district office, and we have Clay Cook, and I don't know, Clay Cook works for you're contracted with the district. He's the mental health therapist or professional that we use for our reference, and so we run things and go that route, and he is going to be more of a consultant with us in the future. And that's one of the very first things that we looked at is, if we want to do this correctly and have evidence-based and make sure that we need someone in that role that will be able to do that for us. And Clay has, a part of the contract with the district, has agreed to do that for us too.
Okay, thank you. And then secondly, with the recently passed legislation for children mental health, do you anticipate any additional funding coming in, or what that might look like in your partnerships going forward?
I do not anticipate much funding for us. I know through the children's mental health, it sounds like it's going to be billed Medicaid and that sort of thing for the most part. And we're not billing at this time for what we do. Now I know through IEPs and that sort of thing that there are the possibilities to do some of that, but we have not taken that on as a part of what we're doing at this time.
So I would just encourage any additional partnerships you can learn about down the road. We should take advantage of that if possible.
We had a meeting with YSS and Juvenile Justice, and we introduced and talked about some of this. And one of the things that the Story County supervisors had talked about was helping possibly provide some resources to us through that. And so there's people out there who are willing, and so hopefully we'll be able to tap into some of that.
And one of the difficulties that I've run into as I've been trying to work with agencies to contract with to provide school-based mental health services, the capacity to sustain the services. It's not an issue on our part, it's an issue on their part, finding the mental health workers and then having the mental health workers be sustainable. And so I met several weeks ago with one agency that felt like we cannot take on Ames. We just don't have the number of people that would be needed. And what I don't want to do is begin those partnerships and have them crumble because we don't have the sustainability piece built in. So I've got 2 more on my list to try to work with, but it's a difficult thing that I think everywhere in our state, all of our districts are facing.
I want to thank you for the presentation and for the work that you're doing with these vulnerable students. We all know how needed the service is, and so thank you for doing that. My question is really just more of a basic question. I'm curious about when you refer to a therapeutic learning community. I'm familiar with the learning community model at Iowa State, and from my perspective, that's where a cohort of students kind of go through the educational experience together and have a social group. And that doesn't sound like the way that when you say learning community, that doesn't sound like what you mean. Can you help me understand from your perspective what a learning community is?
For us, the learning community right now is the students that are there with us, and they do work together quite a bit with the sanctuary model and what they've developed. One of the things that they start every morning off with is, they introduce themselves and they say how they're feeling and this is what they need today. And it's amazing when I've been in there to see the sanctuary model, how many students will step up and help one another. And that's something that I have found has just been really, heartwarming to me, is that community piece is students working and building off of one another and building that place of belonging. And so that's more of what we mean by the community. I don't know that we are going into a perfect learning community as far as what the textbooks say. We kind of kicked around the idea of what we wanted to call it, and we said community because kids were holding each other accountable and building off of one another, and that we were all going to work together for the same goal. So that's where our word community came from.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. That's very helpful. And so I think particularly in a community like Ames, where people may be thinking about a learning community means something because they know that connection with Iowa State. Just to clarify what you're doing, because I think it's really special and important, and to help us all better understand, so that we then know how to better support you. So it's very helpful. Thank you.
This seems like a great program to me. I love that you've gotten it. I've been excited about it ever since I heard from Spence one day that you had it. One question I'd have is this a model that you're thinking about applying it in the middle school, or is there already an overlap with the middle school? I know we have students and needs there too.
And as far as a district, I cannot answer that. I don't know what the middle school has planned. I do know that they are looking at doing some things differently through their recent hires and that sort of thing. So I cannot answer that as far as what that plan looks like, but.
Yeah, I think it's a model that takes very skilled individuals to get it started, and I'm not saying that the middle school doesn't have that, but they currently that's not kind of the structure that's in place there. Is it one that we would want to replicate moving forward? I'm not sure. What I do know is that we need to get school-based mental health services in all of our buildings. And so whether or not that looks like what the high school is doing, I can't answer that, but what I can say is we need that first level of getting the mental health services in the school that we currently don't have.
In the orange packets that I had given you on the last page is kind of some pictures, and I think that is something that's kind of neat. That's pictures of the room, and that's also the board, and that's how they start the sanctuary meeting. Is they set their goals for the day and what classes they're going to make and the things that they need. So you can kind of get an idea about the kids that we're working with, the number of them, and kind of what that looks like. I do think they have a cat still that they're not telling me about. I think there's a therapy cat. I think it's a cat, so I think they're hiding it from me in there, but I'll find it, I'll tell you.
Therapeutic.
It's a biology project. That's what it sounds like to me.
I've heard some pretty emphatic appreciation for what you're doing, and I kind of wanted to reinforce that and just let you know that I've heard that. And I also really appreciate what you're doing. You're making a big difference in a lot of kids' lives.
We had one student that barely made it any days the first semester, and started the second semester. He came in, met with Jean and Jackie and Caitlin, and this second semester, his attendance has improved by leaps and bounds. And he's there. He's now moving into classes, and we've made the movement and impacted his life. And for us, that's what we're aiming for, is to see that and to make sure that we can do that for all of our kids. So thank you for your support.
Thank you very much for your information. I appreciate all my colleagues' questions up here because I think it provides us an opportunity to continue to get to better understand the work that is taking place in our buildings. I think many of us can share personal examples of individuals sharing what a success story it's been, so we appreciate the things that you're doing every day because we know it's not easy. It's one thing to sit here and talk about it, but to be in it day in and day out takes a lot of effort. So thank you, all of you, for the differences you're making in our students' lives.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And I will, opportunity if there's any comments or from the public about the Therapeutic Learning Center at the high school. Seeing none, we will go ahead and go on to our next agenda item, which is, oh, I'm sorry, did someone put their hand up? You come on up, if you'd like to make a comment, come on up, grab a microphone. I know we're real official here. Give us your name and go ahead and tell us your comment.
Oh, turn it on.
Make sure it's on.
My name's Nadia, and I do go to Ames High School, and I'm part of an APACS program, and I want to say it really does help. They take their time to it doesn't feel forced. You don't feel any pressure. You take your time, and they ask you do you need any help? whenever you're done. Like, they just don't pressure you. That's what I like about it. That's all I wanted to say, that
Great.
this program really does help students.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing a firsthand experience with us. We appreciate it. We will go ahead and move on to our next discussion item, which is the introduction of sixth grade intramural sports at the Ames Middle School. I have written down Jonas Michael and Spencer Esslinger, but I think someone else is coming up. Mr. McCray, you.
It's a sub.
We'll see if we can get this to work. Jonas couldn't make it tonight, so I have Steve McCray with me. He's a sixth grade teacher at the middle school, and he may be able to help out with some questions that you guys might have as we go through this presentation. So the proposal that we're bringing to you tonight is starting up a sixth grade intramural program at the middle school. We think we can pull this off next year and then carry it through beyond. And this is something we have not had in place, so we're pretty excited about the opportunity that we may have with this. Our rationale behind this is providing opportunities to our sixth graders that increase specifically their levels of extracurricular participation at Ames Middle School. You know, at the middle school, we always want as close to 100% of our students across the board in all three grade levels to participate in some sort of activity. And we hear a lot from the sixth graders when they come in that they kind of feel isolated and left out. There are opportunities for them, but adding this program is just going to increase them exponentially, I think, in our mind. So currently, sixth graders have the opportunity to participate in band, orchestra, and chorus. There are multiple clubs that they can choose to join, things like drama club, billiards club, but we don't have athletics for them. Put together a survey, and I sent it out to sixth graders. So here's a little data for you. I got 222 responses because sixth graders don't check their email. But there's about 360 in that class right now. The question was simple. If we would have offered sixth grade sports to you this year, would you have played? We got a resounding response with yes. And kind of looking at this a little bit, I think if we maybe took half the maybes, you're looking at 3/4 of the students that replied to the survey would be interested in playing an intramural sport after school. So that's some pretty cool data to look at when we get it back. We also asked them what sport they would be interested in, just to kind of gauge where we may have to go with this if we have the opportunity. So those are just some numbers that I'll chew on, and you guys can take a look at it if you want to. But a lot of volleyball, basketball, soccer, track, pretty good replies across the board from those students. Benefits. I think there's a lot of them. I could have listed a lot more than this, but I thought I'd focus on these 5 quickly for you guys tonight. I think the biggest one is going to be an opportunity to participate for all of our students in 6th grade. We kind of had this discussion a little bit the last time I was here with 7th grade, that when you start talking about club and AAU team fees and so on and so forth, opportunities can be limited for some of our students. There are not going to be any fees for anybody to come out for 6th grade athletics. So we're pretty excited about providing that opportunity for everybody in our building. Building a community and sense of belonging. As I mentioned before, that grade, when they come in, they tend to feel, you're putting 5 elementary schools together into one class. And I just think the chance to go out for athletics, even if it's intramurals, mingling, putting those groups together, is going to do a good job of helping our school build that community and give our kids a sense of belonging at Ames Middle School. The third one is we're hoping, and I'm pretty sure it will, lead to academic benefits. I could throw statistics and data out there that shows that. It definitely happens with our 7th and 8th graders on into the high school, so why not start it in 6th grade? these kids are participating, they start to make the connection pretty quickly that success in the classroom is going to lead to opportunities and success on the playing field, so why not get an early start with it? Fourth benefit will be providing our students a safe environment after school. Our plan is for all our coaches, much like in 7th grade, 8th grade, and the high school, to have coaching authorizations or the endorsement. And just having them at school, after school, gives us an opportunity to continue working with kids at least until 5 o'clock, giving them a safe place to be. Their parents know where they're at, and they know they're under good guidance and in good hands with our coaching staff. And then the final one is providing skill development and all the athletic programs that we're hoping to implement. I'll show you a slide of that next, I think. I'm kind of excited about this one too. This is, if we think of athletics and vertical alignment, we talked last time about 7th grade and 8th grade feeding into that high school. We would be the first middle school in our conference, the CIML, to add organized school-run 6th grade intramural program. So being able to see that now that alignment start in 6th grade, I think our high school coaches would be excited about that too, and I know our middle school coaches will. So it's quite a number of benefits to adding this program. Here's what we were planning on offering in the fall, winter, and spring, probably 2 to 3 sports per. And you can see we have flag football, cross country in the fall, wrestling spirit squad in the winter, and volleyball, basketball, and soccer in the spring, mostly due to a space crunch. We have big numbers in 7th grade and 8th grade, and this will put some stress on the facility. Is Jerry still here? Oh, there's Jerry. But we'll make do. We'll make do. We'll get things figured out. But this is where we think we can offer our best opportunities for kids to play and participate. Okay, costs and time. So this is going to add a little bit to the budget. We're looking at right now 2 coaches per sport, but based on the numbers that we're getting back in those surveys, we're really going to have to, see where we are this first year in terms of numbers. We were talking with the association, and I know that they discussed that a little bit as well, that we're looking somewhere around 4% of our base generator, so approximately $18,000 a year to move forward with this. And the timing on this for the intramural program, we'd like to see these at 4 weeks or 20 practices for these kids, so hopefully 4 to 5 times a week. And compared to a 7th grade season, the 7th grade seasons are 8 weeks long with travel, and those coaches are about 7 to 8% of the base, depending on if you're a head coach or an assistant coach. So that's where we are in terms of finances for this program. We're really looking forward to having the opportunity to do this if we get it. Steve, if you want to mention some of the reactions that you've been getting so far, just quickly, and we can take some questions.
I've been talking to some of the 6th graders, and they come in and go and at first they go, it's not fair, why aren't we getting this? We would really love to do this. And then they look at it a little bit further, we talk about this all the time, they're going, but they have younger siblings, and they're going we're paving the way. We're gonna make this, for them, moving forward. They're really excited for it, they really are, even though they're not gonna get the opportunity to participate in this, they're really looking forward to having this, hopefully, for their younger brothers and sisters to be able to participate in. They get it. They know how it builds that community, how it builds the sense that we belong here. We're part of this building. They get it, so it's fun to see.
So I'll take some questions if you guys have any.
Questions?
Well, thank you, Spencer, for bringing this forward so quickly. I'm very supportive of this concept, I guess. What's the opportunity cost then of the $18,000? Is there excess funds that you're pulling from? Are there things we'll be cutting to make this happen? And then secondly, just very supportive of a program moving forward in whatever fashion, having flexibility, I guess, and how that rolls out. So if you have to make adjustments, I'm very supportive of that. But I think this really goes to Steve's point, building unity for our 6th graders.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll take that one. It's not coming from athletic funds. It'll come out of the reserve that we had left in the budget. Remember, we had about $250,000, so it'll be part of that.
Okay, thank you.
I thought I'd take him off the hook.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. In terms of flexibility, this is definitely going to be kind of a figure it out as we go that first year. We're really going to have to get a feel for numbers that first year. I think, judging from the data I was getting back and listening to sixth grade teachers, that our numbers are going to be pretty impressive, which I'm excited about. So we've talked a little bit about, do we have a pool of coaches, and if we have higher numbers in one particular sport, do we pull another person in to coach that sport as well, and maybe they're lower in another sport, and we can shuffle some of that coaching staff around a little bit like that. But we're kind of figure it out as we go. That's the best I can ask. That's the best answer I can give you.
Sure.
One question I had is, we obviously want to get all the students able to do this. Some students might have transportation needs. Has there been thought given to that to make sure that truly all students can do it and we don't still end up with a selectivity of only students whose parents can come and transport them?
The transportation question, there it is. That is something that we deal with even in 7th and 8th grade. There's a lot of that going on, and we've talked a lot about how to address that issue. Other than getting Durham to start setting up routes at 5 o'clock or 5:30 is tough. Our coaches in the 7th and 8th grade level have done a really good job at getting carpools set up, getting those organized. SciRide is available there, makes a quick stop. We work well with SciRide in order to have tickets available and fare available for the kids. But yeah, that's a good question. That is something that we work with a lot and try to deal with a lot. We put a lot of that on the backs of our coaches right now in order, setting up the carpools and SciRide. That's where we're at. So it's something we can talk about additionally, I guess, with Durham at some point if we get to those numbers. But that's where we're at.
And there's part of this program, I think it's going to be great. My two daughters and my son, I think this is going to really be helpful to the transition process overall, both academically and socially at the middle school. It's an important thing to right away get them into activities right away and getting to know each other from the different schools that they're coming from, and I think this is going to contribute to that greatly. But I do question. You mentioned the practices, so this is intramurals. So when are the games going to be?
Our plan right now is to, with those 4-week seasons, have that last week of each specific sport be a tournament format. So the kids will be split into teams, and sure. We'll invite our parents in to watch, and we'll be having tournaments in whatever sport they're participating in.
And I appreciate you taking on that question regarding the busing. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take that back for you. That's something that I think we as a board and as district, but us as the board, really need to look at from an equity standpoint, for all of our activities after school. I know many districts have activity buses. I remember riding the activity bus when I was in high school. So that is something that we're going to have to factor in, and hopefully next year we can find the funds to do that.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it is a need. It is a need.
And I think that we, being someone who's there at the pickup time after the completion of some of these activities, there is kids who are taking the SciRide. So I think that this is reflecting on a question that came from an earlier presentation, ways that we, as a school district, can utilize things within our community. And so what are those ways that we can reach out to SciRide to really make sure that we are providing? Because as I look at this, the biggest sales point for me is to provide it for all kids. And who are those kids we're missing? Because we know we miss them, and a lot of times it is because of transportation. So what are those ways that we can provide assistance in removing those barriers? So please, district staff, if there's ways that we can reach out to city and other folks who can help us to provide support for that in terms of making sure that our kids don't have that barrier. I applaud your efforts on it and your willingness to take this on with our sixth graders, because it's great because they do need to be a part of the community, and so many of the things that you say I've experienced, I mean, my kids have experienced, right? And so really to provide them those opportunities, that's what it's about, is letting our kids have more and more opportunities. So, and engaging them in the school, maybe in a way that not all kids would be engaged in other ways. So thank you very much for the information. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments from the public on the introduction of a sixth grade intramural sports program? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the report on the receipt of bids for the sale of the $45 million general obligation bonds, Series 2019.
That's stuff. Yep. Surprised at all big bids just the big bids.
Good evening. We sold a few bonds at noon today. So we did our first big installment of the high school bonds. So we sold $45 million on an electronic bidding through the marketplace. I've got Tim Oswald here from Piper Jaffray. He's going to review the results of the bonds, and we had fairly good news today.
Yeah. So bids were due at noon, and unlike the construction world, nobody walks in and hands you a bid anymore in the bond world. It's all electronic, and so what you're looking at is a page from the website that showed the bids in the order of their presentation. And as a sidebar, one of the things I find most entertaining about watching the bid process, which is otherwise very boring, is that if the bid is at noon, there is always one bidder bidding at 11:59:54, which there was today.
Really?
And actually 5 of the bidders bid inside of 1 minute. So anyway, so we did receive 8 bids, and that's pretty good for an issue like this. That's a nice sampling. And the bids range in interest rates from a low of 274, and there were 2 of those, to the very highest one at a 289. So, 274, 274, 276, 279. They're pretty tight, kind of right on top of each other in terms of where they see the marketplace. And no doubt, the good folks at J.P. Morgan are sitting there thinking they might have wanted to sharpen their pencil just a touch more, because they just ever so slightly missed. And I would say, in fairness to the construction folks, it's not uncommon that we're staring at the second decimal place to determine one bid from another. So can I pause and see if you have any questions so far? Excellent. Go ahead.
Maybe just a comment. I'm impressed by the number of bids. Is that unusual, 8, or am I thinking back and seeing that we had in previous bonds that we've done, there were less?
You are correctly remembering that we have had bids where we didn't have 8 bids. That's right. A lot of it has to do with the size of the issue. This size of issue is big enough to attract some national attention to 2 bidders that are New York-based firms bid, but small enough that they can bid against each other rather than having to go together to bid, which sometimes happens when the issues get really large. So you are right. It was a very attractive structure, a very attractive bidding environment, which would be different on a different set of facts.
And does this, how would you forecast our future lettings as we go forward with the project?
So, keeping in mind that none of us own a crystal ball,
Right.
as in terms of interest rates, I'm keenly eager to have next year's bonds sold and locked in. That's the remaining big piece of the four pieces. But I would say we have half of plus or minus half of the issue now locked in. I have always modeled the issue using a 4% interest rate. Neither of the issues so far have been at 4. Today we're at 275. We've built in a cushion that allows for market movement. Not that I'm eager to have market movement, but there is a cushion between where rates really are and what we talk to the taxpayers about when we ask them for permission to sell the bonds.
Okay. And how early can we go for the next batch next year?
Yeah, so there's the federal regs require that you spend the money within 2 years of issuing the bonds. So you've sold plus or minus 50 million to this point with today's action. You'll need to be able to show that you can spend the 50, which seems reasonable given the action you took a little bit ago. But if we're going to sell, let's say, 50 more, we'll need to be able to look pretty carefully at that construction cash flow estimate from Story and say, all right, we're reasonably certain we'll be able to meet that test.
Okay, well, you just let us know when we get to that point.
Yeah, no, that's not lost on Chris or I. That we understand the board would probably like to move forward as soon as it can.
Yeah, I think all of us are anxious to lock in rates.
And I'm waiting for the cash flows from Story as well, because I've got $45 million coming in a month and I need to know how to invest it. So once I get those, we'll be able to plan a little bit. But just to give you an idea, we've spent about half of the $5 million we issued last June. So we haven't mentioned what we actually sold them for. We might want to do that.
So, and I want to be careful. I'm not trying to throw Story under the bus. This is a dialogue back and forth.
I only asked them about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So the winning bid comes from the Milwaukee-based securities firm of Robert Baird at an average interest rate of 274. For the math geeks in the room, the calculation of the average interest rate is the net present value of all the payments on the bonds. It's the discount factor at which you would present value it back. For the non-math, I'm sorry that I just told you that. The second place bid from JP Morgan at a 274. Also, you're in the third decimal place to see a difference. I do want to point out one item, which is that we sold 45 million of bonds, but if you look, well, I guess you don't have that. JP Morgan is paying a purchase price of 47.6 million. That's fine. So there will be proceeds above the amount of the issue. That's a very common structure for this, or occurrence for this type of bond. Yeah, it's going to be hard to read, isn't it? It's better.
It's a different day.
So purchase price is $47,626,000. So the proceeds that'll come into the district will be in excess of the $45 million. That $2.6 million difference will have to be spent on the project, and the 2-year time frame does factor into that as well. So. Questions?
It's great to see the rates where they're at. Just for perspective, and I know the rates don't line up exactly, but the 20-year U.S. bond debt today is at 275, and we got a 274. Again, that just shows the risk that the bondholders view as a school district is very favorable, because we're doing a great job of managing our resources. So, we're AA3 rated, and I think that's reflected in the rates we got. So very happy to see this move forward.
Correct.
and I don't know if I missed it while I was messing around with the paper, but the one thing I wanted to mention is though we sold $45 million of bonds, we are actually going to receive $47,614,000 because of the premium. So that's another $2.5 million that we can put towards the project. And we're kind of building that scenario in for next year too to help us with that. We know the save's been extended now. We're going to talk about that more at the next meeting and what that means and what we have to do on that. But helps us with that overage on, not overage, but that extra money that we had to come up with for the high school that we took out of sales tax at Pepple. So.
So if there aren't any questions, when you get to the resolution, our recommendation would be to award to Robert Baird. They submitted their bid accurately and within the confines of the bid terms.
So one last question, and I couldn't figure this up myself, but you probably have the number. So based on your model at 4%, the rate we got today, how much cheaper did we get the money? So basically, how far ahead of the model are we?
So of all the things I played with, that's not one that I played with today. So if it would be okay, I will get Chris the answer in the morning and let you know. I was more interested in where are we at on the tax rate side than on how much interest we actually save.
I know we had to move for the first payment, which is the one due in 1920 that we levied for. If you remember, we did the pre-levy so that we could levy taxes for this. We moved $150,000 from interest to principal. So for the first payment only, it was $150,000 savings.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps, but that number I remember.
That's an important part because it's going to cost less, so that's great news.
One other thing while we have your attention, Tim and I were running through numbers today, and we're going to run the numbers on sales tax and have some information for you at the next meeting. But one of the things that I've noticed with our debt service fund is because of the commercial and industrial replacement and the uncertainty of us getting that every year, and Mr. Rosser will attest that it came down to the wire whether they were going to fund that again this year. I have not been budgeting that against property taxes. So we've accumulated a little bit of money into the debt service fund because of that replacement. So we are actually going to recommend in September, after I get past the accrual piece, because we have to accrue anything in the first 60 days after the end of the year, to go ahead and call the rest of the bonds, the $1.3 million with cash on hand. So we'll have all of the elementary bonds paid off in September, and we won't have to do a pre-levy for that next year. So we felt that was a pretty good way to bring that balance down. And we might actually get it to a point where we might even be able to start paying some of the high school bonds early before we issue all the bonds. So.
Correct. I think with next year's budget, we'll be having that discussion about, it may be the year following, but we'll be at least be able next year with your budget to have that discussion about prepaying the high school bonds and how aggressive the board wants to be that way. So congratulations, you only paid the elementary off 10 plus years early.
Thank you, because we talked about that a lot a year ago, about how we were going to pay that off early, and so you're helping that come to fruition. So thank you from our community, because you're helping us make that happen. Any other questions for Tim or Chris? Nice work. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Do we have any comments from the public on the receipt of bids for the sale of our 45 million general obligation bonds? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the board committee update. The exhibit is in the packet. I believe that there's minutes from facilities. Any other committees that would like to provide? I know policy, you had to postpone the April 22nd meeting. Any other, any committees or anyone from facilities that wants to highlight anything?
So facilities, much of what we discussed, we actually already went through. We spent a lot of time going through the details of the bids and talking with Story about that. In addition, one thing just to put on everybody's radar, we are talking about having a groundbreaking ceremony for the high school. It's still up in the air a little bit on when that will be, but Superintendent and Eric will be picking a date for that, and we'll all be participating in that, hopefully. Also, there was a little bit of discussion, as Chris mentioned, with the SAVE extension. We need to start planning for how that's going to look, and there's a vote we need to do regarding that with the community, but there'll be more information about that coming too.
I think it's going to be a discussion item, maybe at our next meeting, so.
That's a great segue. Thank you for that segue into.
We've wrapped it up, Louis.
That's right. The legislature wrapped up last week, and I'm proud to say that, you know, we had some really good wins as schools here in the state. So I want to kind of run through just the top five that, you know, we really were focused on this year. First of all is, like it was mentioned, the passage of SAVE. That was extended from 2029 to 2051, which is outstanding. That's going to provide infrastructure and technology support to our schools throughout the state. And really, that's going to make a huge difference, not only immediately for our district with the high school, but also our other needs throughout our district. Even though there were some changes in it that, you know, we had to swallow to get it through, it was okay. And I'm not going to go into the details of that. If you'd like to go to the Iowa Association of School Boards website, I think there's a link on our website that goes there. You can go into the details of how that changed. But in the overall, it was a great big win for us. The next thing I'd like to point out is that, you know, we worked really hard to get and support the child mental health system framework passed, and it did get passed. Unfortunately, there was little funding that was provided by the legislature to implement it. So it's a good first step, but they've got work to finish up next year when they reconvene to properly fund that program, so that, like we heard earlier, the challenges that you know, our schools are facing really are going to be necessary to those funds are going to be necessary to address those concerns. Next, another big win was, yes, we dodged a bullet again on the commercial property tax backfill. And that was something that was talked about by the legislature 2 years ago, and last year and this year they were still chatting about it. And to sum it up, it's a backfill where there was a reduction in property taxes, and then the state backfills that difference for schools, cities, and county governments. And that stayed in place. It didn't change. They didn't take it away. So and that's very good, because that would have been a loss of about $1 million for our district, and our budget would have looked a whole lot different if that had happened. Thirdly, the next great thing that happened, or the fourth thing, was there was no expansion of guns or weapons coming onto school grounds. There were some bills that were passed that would allow parents, others, to walk on the school ground, dropping off their kids, picking up their students, whatever, to continue to conceal and carry, and that did not pass. So we worked long and hard to stop that from happening, and we were successful. And lastly, there was no movement on the school voucher programs. Those were discussed again, but there was no will for them to get through this session. But we need to also stay on our guard. I'm sure it'll come up in the next year's session, and we'll need our public school advocates out there keeping our legislators informed that that is something that for public schools, it's not needed here in Iowa. We have good choices in public education and education for students throughout the state. It's not something that is really necessary in the state of Iowa at this time. So that's it.
Thanks for the update.
I just have one question, I guess, for Louis or Chris. With that SAVE money now being 30% taken off for the extension, is that happening now, or do we have till 2029 to still have access to that?
I can answer that. The way it's set up, the tax, the sales tax has to be over 2% for it to go up the 1%, and it can only do it incrementally each year. So for 1 year, if it goes over the cap, then it goes up to 1%, and it can't go more. than the 30% over the time from 2029 to 2050, 51. So it's kind of a cap on that. So it doesn't, and that's a really good question, because when I first heard it, Luke, I was like, what, 30% right off the top? That
So
doesn't make
they're not
sense.
taking 30% and shifting it?
No, it's
Okay.
1%. It's going to take little baby steps to go up, and it can't exceed the 30%.
Okay.
Okay, so next year, if the sales tax collected goes up more than 2%, then it'll kick in, and then they'll take out an additional 1%.
Okay, thank you for
Okay, but if it
clarifying.
never goes to above that 2%, then it won't kick in. Correct me if I'm,
I think the current funding through 2029 is protected.
yeah, for 29.
Yeah, so it'd be 2030 would be the first year it could happen.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other updates? Any comments from the public on our board committee updates? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the public forum. Karen Stein?
You have to turn, they're up.
Just turn it
on. Yeah,
Yeah,
keep
yep,
going.
okay.
Okay, great.
There you go.
Good evening. First, I'd like to ask if we can expand Jim Mohammed and Brian Carrico's program in the middle school, please. It's needed there too. The purpose I came today is to talk to you guys about the Lucy Calkins program, which was voted on last week. I'd like to go through 3 different points. The first point is we really needed more time. We need to be more timely on the matter, especially when it affects our students academically and our financial resources. We shouldn't rush these decisions. The second point is discussion and data. As our elected representatives and school leaders, your community deserves and needs to hear an honest and transparent discussion and see data about reading, literacy programs, and how it lines up and supports existing programs. And how it supports all groups of students, specifically our students with learning, reading disabilities. That affects about 20 to 30% of our students, and that is roughly about 1,350 students on the higher end. That is almost the population in our high school, or 54 classrooms of 25 students each, which is roughly 3 elementary schools. My third point is we got to keep our commitments. Ms. Reisner, Ms. Lane, and Ms. Morton assured us during the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting that all of our general reading, writing, literacy programs would support our existing Wilson program, that you would work with our Wilson representative to find supporting reading, writing, and literacy general programs. Was this done? Finally, please let's schedule a public dialogue to discuss this. This is not micromanaging, it is having the support from your community. It is vital to be transparent and truly support 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old children that have learning and/or reading disabilities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen. I will entertain a motion for consent items.
So moved.
Second.
Minutes from the meeting held April 22nd, 2019. Personnel report. Contracts, including 2019-20 cooperative sponsorship agreement with Gilbert for orchestra, 2019-20 agreement with Drake University for Head Start program, open enrollment applications, and gifts to the district, including Thompson Financial, Dr. David Grant, Renewal Energy Group, Dentistry at Somerset, Northwestern Mutual, and Ames Home Builders Association.
It's been moved by Rosser, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Our first action item this evening is the 2018-19 proposed budget amendment.
I move the board direct the board secretary to publish the proposed budget amendment and to set the date and time for the public hearing for May 20th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Colton. Discussion?
As you know, if the school district is going to amend its current year budget, it needs to do it by May 31st. It needs to hold a public hearing and then adopt that amendment. When I reviewed it, we were really close. I was a little worried about going over in the non-instructional, which is mainly food service. I was within like $15,000, $20,000, and I just wasn't comfortable with that by the time I put commodities and depreciation in there. So I needed to amend that area. I felt like with the purchase of some of the curriculum that we're doing at year end that I do $250,000 to instruction, and then we're trying to get some of our PD money spent as well. So I did $250,000 to the support services, which includes the staff support services. So a very small amendment, but I figured as long as I was amending one area, I might as well be safe. It doesn't affect taxes, doesn't affect how much revenue, it's just budget authority.
Any other discussion? It's been moved by Rosser, seconded by Colton. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Item 16, transitioning intramural 7th grade volleyball and basketball programs.
I move the board approve the transition of 7th grade volleyball and basketball from intramural competition to interscholastic competition for the 2019-20 school year.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Colton. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Item 17, resolution directing the sale of the $45 million general obligation bonds, Series 2019.
I move the board approve the resolution directing the sale of $45 million general obligation bonds.
Second.
Moved by Bankin, seconded by Perez. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Roll call.
I think it's a roll call.
Oh, thank you very,
That's okay.
didn't highlight
That's
it.
okay.
Go ahead, roll call.
Perez, aye.
Deirdre, aye.
Bacon, aye.
Beerbaum, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Colton, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Passes 7-0. Thank you. Items from the board.
I just want to state, I really appreciate all the work that goes into managing the financial aspect of the school district. I think we do a great job. The one thing, as we move forward with our further discussions, I think we need to be very mindful. We committed to the public that we could build the high school without raising taxes. And I think with the passage of SAVE and also our interest rates coming in lower than anticipated, I think it's natural for us to say we have more flexibility to maybe spend more money. I think we need to, though, balance that with property tax relief. And so as we move forward, I just encourage us to think, okay, how can we be good stewards of our resources to make sure we have the facilities that we need for our kids and staff, but also understand the impact to our taxpayers.
Any other comments? I will just add, I want to thank all of you. I know that this is not an easy job, and in knowing that it's school board recognition, I just want to let you all know that I appreciate working with all of you. And I know we have differing opinions and we have very vibrant conversations up here. But I think that our school district benefits from us having challenging discussions and really trying to work through some of the difficult topics. And I appreciate that the questions are asked up here because there have been topics tonight that I didn't even have to ask a question because I was checking them off as you all were going. So I appreciate the thoroughness in which we approach topics. And also want to add, it's also Teacher Appreciation Week. And so to all of our teachers that are out there, thank you. It blows my mind the things that our teachers do, and our presentation earlier this evening about the TLC sometimes it breaks my heart that we have to listen to those kinds of presentations, because that's the reality of our kids' world right now. But I think that that emphasizes just how important our role is to make sure that we are doing the things that we need to do to support them in many capacities, whether it's in the TLC room at the high school, it's adding athletic opportunities at the middle school, and in addition to all of the other opportunities that our kids are getting. So to all of our teachers, thank you so much, because I know my kids are wound up right now, and so I would imagine a lot of kids are wound up because spring has sprung, and they're all doing the alphabet countdown to the last day, which today was H. Many kids had hats on, but they're doing the countdown to that last day. So we know that all of the teachers are taking advantage of every minute to make a difference in our kids' lives. So thank you to all of our
They don't do that at the high
educators.
school anymore.
No hats at the high school.
They don't do the
Okay.
alphabet
You're out of
countdown.
Items from the superintendent.
I first want to start by thanking the board and the staff for allowing me to deal with a family emergency. So I truly, truly appreciate that, and the support that came, and the amazing emails from staff. I greatly appreciate that. Those are not easy decisions to make. And so like you, I was going to point out, it's Teacher Appreciation Week, and I think sometimes that job just feels thankless. And so I have to say this tonight. I read an email that was sent to one of our teachers by a community member. Oh, it gets me. And I just publicly want to say to our teachers, thank you. Thank you for living in a community that sometimes is pretty hard and harsh and says things that are really not professional and not acceptable in any realm. And so for that, and for the work that you do, and get that kind of get those kind of emails, I can't imagine. So thank you. So that being said, the other couple things that I have is in the next 2 weeks, we'll be having our kindergarten preview nights. So I believe there was one tonight, there'll be one tomorrow night. Those are super fun events. I haven't got to experience it here in Ames, so I'm gonna try to jet to a couple of the schools this week. But if you get a chance to stop by, that's a great time to see new, exciting faces that walk into our building. And I think that's all I have for my update, but I do have a couple calendar items.
Okay, so board planning calendar.
So we have a board work session, May 15th at 5:30. That won't be very lengthy. Jerry will not be here, but we will still have that update and kind of just talk a little bit about, I think they're going to talk about kind of that whole bidding process. So it won't be lengthy, but we want to make sure we keep that on the calendar. And then our next board meeting is the 20th. And that's all I have on our calendar at this point. And I was going to remind you when graduation was tonight, because I always like to get that in my mind. 26th.
Yeah.
It's 26th.
Yeah.
There we go.
Good. All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you.